Hi everyone, it's Mike Herrman here from Wild Geese Group. I just wanted to compile a quick video for this month's newsletter for the purposes really of providing a guide to business development managers and all the CLSs and to CLS clients if need be, as to provide them with an understanding, a bit of a summary of the specialised APIDO emergency response standards that we hold and that you are immediately able to deliver, and especially with respect to the online assessments, and then more later on in the timeline with respect to physical delivery of the training at your sites once we complete the necessary monitoring, rather desktop and then site auditing process. But I wanted to give you something, a handy use guide to quickly refer to and to show to the clients a bit of a background as to each one of those standards. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen with you so that you can see the presentation that I've compiled for you. And we'll just go through that. Now, obviously, you can see here that this is the beginner's guide to the APIDO specialist emergency response standards of, and as the bullet points there indicate, starting with MEMIR, which is Major Emergency Management Initial Response. Next, we'll look at the Offshore Installation Manager Controlling Emergencies, which of course can be done online, as well as the CROER, which is a Control Room Operator Emergency Response Standard, again can be done online. And also I wanted to just include the PMI-CIR, which is Plant Manager and Incident Commander Initial Response, which is one of those specialist emergency response roles as well, albeit not one that I don't think any of the CLSs have undertaken. So let's look initially at the APIDO MEMIR, starting of course with the target audience. Who is the target audience? Well, personnel who are either designated as being in charge of or are members of, or who provide support to an emergency management team or an emergency management manager in an emergency. Basically, this is an entry-level course, probably one of our most common courses, because you don't need any prerequisite to attend the course. It's importantly, a no, pass or fail. It's all about exposure and development for anybody involved in that emergency response team. Attendees, minimum of 1, maximum of 6, and that's the case for all of our specialist emergency management courses. Duration, 2 to 3.5 days, depending on the number of attendees. The first day of this course is all theory, and the ensuing days are all about the practical scenarios. Competency evaluation, as I said, this is a non-pass or fail course, so that's a reason why it's so attractive to many attendees. It exposes them to everything that the emergency manager is exposed to and his teams without the pressure of a pass or fail assessment environment, which is what the OMCE is all about. So it's a really good course to introduce all of the attendees to what they're going to be exposed to in a real emergency back in their own unit. Next one, of course, is the OMCE, and that's the Offshore Installation Manager Controlling Emergencies. It's very, very important for anybody communicating about this course to communicate that this is an assessment-only process, and by that I mean there is no learning module. The APIDO MEMIR, which is the stepping stone to this, has a learning module, a full day of learning about the roles and responsibilities of the people who work in the ECC during an emergency, about the expectations of the individuals and the team in that environment, and what the purpose of that team is all about. Anybody attending the OMCE should already have a good understanding and knowledge of all of that. They come here either as already being an OEM, somebody who is a potential OEM, somebody who's maybe a deputy, so somebody senior who, if not in an OEM position already, is maybe filling that position as an emergency or a standby role, but somebody importantly who has been already identified by the company as being ready to undergo the assessment process. In terms of attendee numbers, minimum of 1, maximum of 6 per course, no different from any of the others. Duration, 1 to 3 days, again, really depends on the number of attendees. The duration of any of these programs depends heavily on the amount of people attending. 1 or 3 days up to 3 days for the OEMCE. It's important to remember for the OEMCE, we commence the assessments almost straight away. We go through the assessment criteria, the performance criteria, of course, when we welcome the attendees in. We take them through the model that we're assessing them in, but it's really important for them to remember that they must come to us ready to undergo the assessment. If they are not, and they indicate at all that they may not be, then the APIDO MEMIR is something that they should attend before this. Alternatively, we are able to offer them a preparation course, which isn't APIDO. It's purely about a preparation course tailored for them to get them ready if they don't want to do the APIDO MEMIR. It's just an alternative for them. The prerequisite, of course, and I've alluded to this already for the OEMCE, is that in addition to being ready to undergo the assessment, the company must confirm that to us in writing. We will send them a pre-assessment company guide and declaration. They have to complete that, and that's basically a confirmation that the attendee that they send is ready in all respects to undergo the assessment. That benefits the client company. They don't waste money by sending someone who's not ready and then get a failure. It also, of course, benefits the delegate to make sure that they are ready. In terms of the assessment process, minimum of 3 and maximum of 4 practical assessment scenarios. What that essentially means is they get an opportunity to fail one and get a reassessment, if you like, but that can only happen once. So minimum of 3, maximum of 4 practical assessments. The other assessment process that we have is the APIDO CROER, and again, an assessment-only process, no learning module. Target audience, people who are either basically target audience for this are people who are already a CRO. Again, it's not a learning process, so they must already be a CRO in an emergency management team, or at least be ready to undergo an assessment process that may see them signed off internally as being competent. Attendees, again, the same, minimum of 1, maximum of 6, 1 to 3 days, depending on the number of attendees. You can see how this is a trending item. The duration really depends on the number of attendees. Again, as soon as they arrive to the class, we go through the performance criteria and then straight into the assessment process. In terms of a prerequisite, just like the OEMCE, a pre-assessment company guide and declaration that we send to the client must be completed and returned. And that's our confirmation that that delegate is ready to undergo the assessment process. What a lot of clients use is the APIDO MEMIR as a preparation for the CRO. So just like it is used for a preparation for the OEM, the MEMIR can be used as a preparation for the CRO as well. But it's important for them to remember that the CROER is an assessment-only process. In terms of competency evaluation, again, scenarios, a minimum of 2, maximum of 3 practical assessment scenarios. Okay, this is important. When we talk about the online options for the OEMCE and CROER, some commonly asked questions that we get with respect to the technical requirements. In terms of what APIDO require of the competency, nothing changes in that regard. Still the same amount of scenarios, still an assessment-only process. But of course, being an online assessment, there are some technical aspects to consider, as well as a location aspect. And if you look at the slide there, to achieve optimum training quality and effectiveness, the delegates must ensure they have, of course, the working computer hardware and software that they're going to need ready and tested for them at their location. We will be ready on our end. We must make sure that they are ready in all respects on their end to commence the assessment process. So therefore, before the training takes place, they must, I suppose before we go into some technical aspects, let's talk first of all about a question I get asked a lot about, and that is, Mike, do we need to download any software? Do we need to join Zoom? Do we need to join Microsoft Teams? And the short answer to that is no. There's no requirement to download Zoom, to download Microsoft Teams. It can be all done online as a visitor. using that software. Wild Geese Group have already paid for the professional login that's required for us to manage the scenarios from our end. Yeah, so access to the simulator model, to the Zoom or Microsoft Teams or any one of the other softwares that are available to conduct this online is not required to be downloaded or paid for by the client in any aspect. And that's a frequently asked question that we get a lot. And then your standard things like, of course, you need immediate email and phone access so that if there is a problem, we can contact the delegate straight away. We can email the delegate what they need to get emailed in terms of any other training aids, POB lists or checklists that we want them to have access to before the scenario starts. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. PC and Mac, of course, they need a computer with reliable internet access at an appropriate speed just to handle a basic Zoom or Microsoft Teams call. So nothing special required there. Minimum display resolution, that's what my IT man tells me. All that is essentially is telling us is that it best not to be done on a tablet, but on a laptop or a desktop. Of course, a microphone capability, speaker capability, and video camera. Everything that you need to conduct a basic Zoom or Microsoft Teams call. An earphones or headset is definitely preferred, but not mandatory. For the obvious reasons, anyone using Zoom frequently will acknowledge that it's always better to have a headset or earphones so that you can hear a lot better, so that we can both communicate a lot easier and more effectively at either end. What earphones or a headset also does provide the delegate is that it provides them with a lack of distraction, or minimises that chance of them to be distracted for whatever reason. Delegates should be in a controlled environment to minimise the risk of distraction during the training. That is, not with small children pulling at their leg. Ideally, pedo assessments need to be done in a controlled environment. That is a professional environment. Can be done from an offshore environment, a plant, a company office. It is definitely recommended that these assessments get done in a controlled environment. The last screen that I've included here is a comparison table, which really is a side-by-side comparison of MEMIR, OEMCE, PMIC I'm about to tell you about, but I'm not going into too much detail, and then the CROER. So that is a handy comparison table for anybody who is not as familiar with these processes or standards as we are, just to answer some quick over-the-phone questions or provide some guidance or feedback to clients or potential clients as to what's required of each of these standards. Again, one phone call to me or an email to me or any of my team can clarify any questions that you might have about anything in relation to any of these standards. All right, that completes the presentation. The only other thing I think I missed out on there was the plant manager, incident commander, incident response standard. And none of you are going for that standard, but that is basically exactly the same as the MEMIR, but purely for onshore teams. So somebody in a plant environment as opposed to an offshore environment. I hope you've all taken something out of this presentation. For what it's worth, a handy guide for you to all have information with respect to the standards. In particular, at this stage of our collaboration, for most of you, the most important ones there are the remote options that you can immediately start gaining revenue from. If you're a provider, you're able to market and explain those. And remembering that, of course, we're always immediately accessible to explain to either you or the client as to the benefits of those remote or online programs. Any other questions, of course, give us a call whenever you need to. Thank you and bye for now.